It. Now, tech companies might be the buzziest, but a new study shows they're not the ones with the most staying power in terms of brands. FutureBrand ranks companies by perceived strength. These come out on top. You're looking at them right there. Apple, in fact, as you can see, is the only FAANG company in the top 10, and it fell down the list along with Facebook, Alphabet, Amazon, and Tencent. John Tipple is the Chief Strategy Officer at FutureBrand, and he joins me now. In terms of putting together a survey like this, and in terms of how you put data together, I didn't see a huge correlation at times with, let's say, success and profitability and these brands. Is that true, or is the correlation there when you plot it on a longer-term graph?
Yeah, hi Paula. Thank you for having me on. It's great to be here. In order to answer that question, I'll just give it a little bit of context. While of course there are many different ways to manage brands in this day and age, the thing that great brands seem to have and share as a core characteristic is the ability to manage their purpose against their experience. And I think that's something that's true of all brands, not just necessarily the tech sector. When you drill into the tech sector, as we have done in our survey, which you mentioned, the FutureBrand Index, what you begin to see is that the tech companies seem to have a little bit of a confidence crisis right now. I mean, what we're beginning to see is that technology has always been somewhat not set. It's always been changing, which in some way makes it incredibly exciting. But on the other hand, whilst our globally informed public that responded to our survey said that they definitely saw brands like Google, like Amazon, like Facebook being a part of their long-term future, some of the things that are causing them concerns in the short term are affecting their confidence around technology brands, which could in turn have an effect on profitability and, usage. For example, people are concerned as to whether technology brands are genuinely changing people's lives for the better. If you look at how they rate, for example, healthcare companies, which is seen as incredibly positive, there's a concern around technology companies being generally having strong principles. Is that a question that they're beginning to ask? Genuinely being around to make our lives better. And I think that on the one hand that creates a degree of uncertainty, but it also creates a huge opportunity for new brands to come into the space. If you notice, Nvidia is a brand that's new into the sector and new into the study this year, as is Adobe. And I'd also mention brands like Verizon, which typically have come from a telco background rather, but are now beginning to bring something new and potentially quite interesting into technology.
And I want to get to some of the brands though that are falling behind, because they are household names. I mean, we have Walmart, L'Oreal, HSBC, which you say are falling behind. Why?
There's a fundamentally the brands that grow well are doing a fantastic job of balancing what they stand for, their purpose, against the experiences they bring people every day. In the examples you use there's usually an issue typically with one or either or both of those. So if, for example, you were to talk about Walmart's one of those companies that across almost every measure, with I think the exception of indispensability, is seen as no longer exciting people, no longer animating people, and the experiences it offers people are increasingly perceived to be somewhat banal. We're dealing with employees and consumers and generally a world these days where people can be incredibly discerning about where they spend their time and their money. And if brands aren't able to give them experiences that are genuinely meaningful to their lives, that give them a sense of direction, sense of purpose, and allow them to meaningfully interact, then I think brands like the ones you've just featured tend to slip down the list. There are, of course, also some particularly structural issues that will be affecting individual categories. We look at luxury. In some ways, it's harsh on Louis Vuitton because Louis Vuitton, LVMH, is really the only traditional luxury brand that's managed to be in the PwC top 100 global brands, global companies, which is our start point. And in some ways, they're suffering some of the challenges that the traditional luxury brands are suffering. But at the same time, there is a change in consumer behavior these days. It used to be very simple to sell to new consumers and sell luxury to consumers, but these days they're looking for much more meaningful, independent experiences, and the need to adapt to those is something that's a real challenge. It does seem to be something that becomes more and more difficult to put your finger on in terms of how these brands fare individually year to year.